Bits, of course, it's not alive. Yes, crystals grow, but that does not make them alive. Living things have special orders for them. It's the study of biology. If something's alive, then we can see that it's a part of biology. It could be a fish, a frog, or a mule. It could be a teacher at your school. So how do we know if something's alive? I'll tell you, there are 7 things it needs to survive. If something's alive, then its cells divide because of the actions of the nucleotide. It's not a rock, a stone, or a key. That would be geology. So how do we know if something's alive? There are 7 things it needs to survive. It's got to grow. It's got to move and stay loose. It's got to eat. It's got to reproduce. It's got to respond to stimuli. It's got to breathe or it will die. Now the last one is kind of discreet. If it eats, it's got to excrete. Biology. That's the study of the life we see. Biology. The science of life is biology. Look at all the cells fit. It's all part of life. DNA, molecules. How do you know if something's alive? There are 7 things it needs to survive. It's got to grow, it's got to move and stay loose. It's got to eat, it's got to reproduce, it's got to respond to stimuli. It's got to breathe or it will die. And the last one, it's a kind of discreet. Shh. If it eats, it's got to excrete. Biology. That's the study of you and me. Biology. The science of life is biology. Biology. The study of life that we see. Biology. The science of life is biology. It's the pigs, the frogs, the moons, and the cats. Everybody there knows where it's at. Monkeys and dogs and pigs and mules. Mules, Geigers and Schnappers and pigs. Mutter, Geigers and Irish.
Atoms. Atoms.
All matter comes in 4 known forms: a solid, a liquid, a gas, and plasma.
Electric motor. Flashlight. Encyclopedia. Fossil. Light bulb. Magnet.
Magnets are part of magnetism, which is part of electromagnetism, which is part of the electromagnetic spectrum, which includes visible light. Does it sound familiar? Of course, it's because we're all connected. But the connections of magnets and magnetism to our lives is very important. Without magnets, there would not be computers, television, electricity, radios, nothing. Let me tell you something. Magnets have a lot of pull. Think about the magnets that you put on your refrigerator. What makes them stick there? There's no glue or tape or staples or paper. What is it? Peanut butter?
A magnet is a piece of metal surrounded by an invisible force field. This invisible field either attracts or repels other magnetic objects. The magnets on your refrigerator are attracted to the metal on the refrigerator door. There are 2 types of magnets: permanent magnets and electromagnets. Permanent magnets always keep their magnetism.
Scientists believe that the Earth's magnetic field comes from the intense activity that takes place in the molten iron core.
And all magnets have a north pole and a south pole. The magnetic force flows between these 2 poles.
Tell me, Cube, which is attracted to which? A North Pole to a barbershop pole? A South Pole to a lamp pole? Or the North Pole and the South Pole?
You're so silly, Professor. A North Pole and a South Pole is the correct answer. Opposite forces attract, while the two similar forces repel each other.
Electromagnet.
In an electromagnet, magnetism is produced. Then an electric current flows through a wire, which is wound around an iron bar. Unlike permanent magnets, electromagnets work only when the electrons are flowing through the wire to create a magnetic field.
Superconductor.
Beats, do you know what a superconductor is? Those are all very good conductors, but they aren't superconductors. A superconductor is a special material that is supercooled so that the electricity that is flowing through it does it with almost no resistance. Resistance is like sliding down a sliding board that's made of concrete. You would get to the bottom, but you would leave a lot of your bottom on the slide. If the slide was coated with ice, you would slide right down with very little resistance. And that is what the electrons do in an object that is made of superconductive material.
Superconductivity was discovered in the early 1900s by a Dutch physicist named Hfric Onnes. He was able to supercool mercury with liquid helium and found that there was little or no resistance to the flow of electricity through the metal.
The Earth has two magnetic poles, a magnetic north and a magnetic south. But for some reason, the magnetic poles of the Earth switch places. What do you think of that?
That's very interesting, Professor, although it doesn't happen very often. These reversals occur on an average once every 200,000 years.
Which means it doesn't look like we'll be seeing it happen too often. But there have been 22 reversals of the polarity of the Earth's magnetic field in the last 4.5 million years. Now, we cannot see an invisible magnetic field. So how do we know that it happens? Cube, tell them.
Scientists know that these shifts occur from studying the results of lava flow on the seafloor. As lava cools, the metal within it aligns with Earth's magnetic north. Scientists have found a zebra-like pattern in the hardened lava, which indicates polar shifts.
I hope it doesn't affect my credit card.
Compass.
Compasses can rescue people when they are lost.
Or prevent people from getting lost in the first place.
A compass always points to the magnetic north, which, by the way, is not always the geographic north, which is the place at the very top of the globe. This is because magnetic north is about 12 degrees off of the north axis, and the axis is the line on which the Earth rotates. So, you see, a compass is a good use of a magnet. In a compass, the magnet is allowed to pivot freely at its midsection, and it will always orient itself in line with the Earth's magnetic north and south, because, of course, a magnet has two poles, just like the Earth. It's beautiful, isn't it?
If you'd like to make a simple compass of your own, you can visit the junk drawer.
Frog.
Frogs are amphibians. The word amphibia means both lives because they begin their lives in the water and live as adults both on the land and in the water, returning to the water to lay eggs. Not for breakfast, but for babies.
Other examples of amphibians are toads, salamanders, and newts. These creatures are the most primitive of all land vertebrates for two reasons. They must lay their eggs in water, and they don't have a shell.
Maybe that's why in fairy tales they were always turning people into toads and frogs. It's not a pretty picture.
Tadpole.
Frogs begin life as tadpoles. They resemble fish more than they do frogs.
Tadpoles even breathe through gills like a fish. Before too long, a breathing hole opens in the tadpole's head. Eventually, the tail is absorbed for nutrition, and hind legs begin to appear where the tail once was.
When the front legs appear, the tadpole begins breathing to its mouth, using its lungs rather than its gills. This is when the tadpole completes its metamorphosis and is a full-fledged frog. A full-fledged frog. A full-fledged... Pitts, I need a glass of water. I think I got a frog in my throat.
Smallest frog.
The smallest frog in the world is the Smintholus limbatus. It is found in Cuba. Adults are usually less than half an inch long, so if you had a Smintholus limbatus frog lined up in a row, head to toe for 5 miles, you'd have a lot of little Cuban frogs.
Largest frog.
The largest frog in the world is from Equatorial Guinea. It's called the Goliath frog, because it's a big frog.
A female Goliath can weigh 7.5 pounds and reach 32 inches in length. This frog is very rare.
Most poisonous.
The most poisonous frog in the world lives in Western Colombia, and it's called the golden poison dart frog. Just the name is scary. It was discovered in 1973, and it's used to make poison darts by the natives to actually kill the monkeys that they have for breakfast. Sorry, it's the truth. Ugh.
The poison is secreted through its skin and is 20 times more powerful than that of any other known poisonous frog. An adult frog contains 1,800 micrograms of poison. That's enough to kill 1,400 people.
So if you see a frog like this in the punch bowl, tell everyone to have milk.
Frog. Radio.
I love to listen to the radio when I drive. The first radio was invented in 1896, and today in the United States there are over 2 radios for every person, which means we can all listen in stereo.
With that many radios, it makes sense that the United States has the most radio stations of any country in the world.
Cube, let me tell you something. The United States has over 11,000 radio stations. That's a lot of AM and FM, if you know what I mean. Tell them how it works.
Okay, Professor. To understand how sound is transmitted by radio waves, we should start with the microphone. Sound waves cause a device inside the microphone to vibrate. The vibrations then produce an electric current. This current is converted into radio waves by a transmitter. As the radio waves exit the transmitter, they are sent into the atmosphere by an antenna.
Now something is strange here, Cube. The waves continue to disperse all through space. What traps them?
There's an antenna on the other radio receiving the signal. This antenna picks up the radio waves and sends them to its receiver, where the waves are converted back into an electrical current. This then makes a speaker vibrate to produce the sound.
I've got it! That sound is transmitted and then it's transferred into a sound that comes back into the speaker and we hear the noise. It's so simple.
Radio waves. Radio waves.
Radio waves are only one part of the electromagnetic spectrum. This was first understood by James Clerk Maxwell in 1860.
That's right, Cube. There were radio waves, visible light, infrared waves, ultraviolet waves, X-rays, gamma waves. All of these rays combined to make the electromagnetic spectrum. The problem was, when the radio waves were first discovered, there were no radio stations to broadcast. Talk about a bummer.
In 1896, an Italian engineer named Guglielmo Marconi patented a telegraph system that sent signals through the air via radio waves and a radio transmitter. This technique became known as wireless telegraphy, since no wires were needed to hook the sending and receiving equipment together.
In 1906, the first radio signal was sent by... What was his name, Cube?
Reginald Fessenden, Professor.
That's it! When Mr. Fessenden made the first radio broadcast, Everybody was so surprised because they thought they were going to hear Morse code. These little beeps of dots and dashes. Dot, 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 dash, dash, dash. It's not that interesting. So you can imagine how astonished and surprised they were when the operators heard the sound of music. Think of all the commuters today who are saved from being bored to death by listening to the radio. Don't turn that dial.
Radar.
Radar works by sending out a signal at the speed of light. The signal is bounced off an object, and the time it takes the signal to return tells us how far away the object is. This method is similar to sonar. However, sonar travels at the speed of sound, so it is much slower.
In 1934, Hfric developed a magnetron in France. His invention was then sent to England, where the magnetron played an important role in the future of radar systems. During the same time, Pierre David was completing his own experiments in France. He developed an electromagnetic system for detecting aircraft up to 3.1 miles away.
A team of researchers continued to work on radar during the beginning of World War II. Sir Robert Watson Watt was in charge of a group which completed the invention of radar. Their system became an important part of the anti-aircraft defense system during the Battle of Britain.
Sonar.
In 1915, a Frenchman named Paul Longplay developed a system for detecting icebergs, and we call it sonar. It's an acronym. Each letter stands for a word. Cube, tell them.
Well, Professor, the name comes from the Americans who used it in World War II. It stands for sound, navigation, and ranging.
Exactly. And now please tell them how sonar works.
Of course, Professor. First, regular pulses of sound energy are sent through the water. Once they hit an object, they're reflected and an echo travels back. The time that elapses between when the pulses were sent and when the echo is received indicates how far away the object is.
Shortly after Longplay developed his system for detecting icebergs, a man from Wisconsin adapted the sonar to search for submarines. By the 1920s, developments for sonar were well underway in England.
By 1939, sonar was installed in 200 British Navy destroyers, and it proved very useful to the British and Americans near the end of World War II.
People aren't the only ones to use sonar. Dolphins also use it. Their nasal passages emit clicks that allow them to detect objects in the ocean.
Alligator.
You picked alligator. The word alligator comes from the Spanish word lagarto, which means lizard. The alligator is a reptile. Other examples of reptiles are turtles, lizards, and snakes.
All reptiles are cold-blooded. Their body temperature is controlled by their environment. This means that they get their warmth from things outside of themselves, like the sun, warm stones, and heated ground.
The temperature of our blood is 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. How cold do you think the blood of a reptile gets? Is it A, 65,000 degrees? Is it B, 240 degrees minus zero? Or is it C, 42 degrees Fahrenheit? What do you think? Human beings are mammals, not reptiles, and mammals are warm-blooded. This means that their body temperature is controlled from within their bodies instead of outside of their bodies like snakes and hot rocks. I know of some alligators who found a strange way to adapt to their environment. Cube, help me find that video clip.
Humans aren't the only ones escaping the heat by shooting down water slides. Alligators are getting in the swim too. Watch this gator perform a perfect half gainer.
I guess these alligators decided what was good for humans was good enough for them. Here's another multiple choice question. There are alligators in only 2 countries in the world. See if you can find which one. Is it A, France and Germany, B, Costa Rica and Egypt, or C, the United States and China?
Crocodile.
The crocodile is the same family as the alligator. Crocodiles have a narrower snout. When their mouths are closed, you can see two large teeth on the side. Here, you see? Now, say ah! Ooh, boy, when their mouths are open, that's a lot more than two teeth. I'd hate to have your dental bill. 32, 33, 34 cube. How many teeth are in this mouth?
Well, Professor, adult crocodiles have 40 to 60 teeth in each jaw, which interlock when they close their mouths. Their jaws are so powerful that they can crush the bones of small animals.
Ouch! But when their jaws are open, they are so weak that I can close them with my hands. But don't try this at home.
Did you know that crocodiles are oviparous, meaning that they lay eggs? They usually lay between 20 to 90 eggs per year that are about the size of a lemon.
I love it when you say oviparous, Cube. That is part of the reason that they like the heat and the mud of the swamp. It's like a nursery.
I don't understand what that has to do with laying eggs, Professor.
Well, listen, I'll tell you. The crocodile mommy buries her eggs in the sand and mud. So then the sun shines down and heats up the mud and keeps it warm, which lets the eggs mature until eventually they hatch. Once they've hatched, the mother cares for her young, often carrying them in her mouth or leading them around. Isn't motherhood wonderful?
Komodo dragon.
Boy, the Komodo dragon. I love this guy. He's the world's largest lizard. And he can weigh up to 350 pounds. That's as heavy as 350 boxes of cereal. And he grows up to 10 feet long. That's about as long as a car. Oh, boy. An adult Komodo dragon can eat an animal the size of a goat at one time and spend an entire week digesting a meal.
Leatherbacked.
This is the leatherback turtle. It is the largest living marine reptile. The average turtle is 6 to 7 feet long and about 7 feet across the flippers. They weigh about 1,000 pounds, which is as much as a motorcycle, and spend most of their adult lives in the water.
Turtles have been living on the Earth for a very long time. We found turtle fossils that date back to the Triassic period, which was about 200 million years ago.
Boy, it seems that long since I've had a date myself. I had a date back in the Jurassic period. Oh, it seems that long. Oh boy, it's not easy being smart and little with red hair and big eyes. Who's going to like me besides you, Cube?
I like you, Professor.
Oh, Cube, you say the nicest things, 'cause I programmed you to. One of the reasons that the turtle has survived so long is because it's so well protected. In fact, the turtle is the most heavily armored animal to ever live.
Turtles have a hard shell that protects all the important organs in their bodies, and only their heads, necks, limbs, and tails stick out. The shells are quite hard and usually very thick, but because they have nerves embedded in them, they're still quite sensitive.
Reticulated python.
This is the reticulated python, which has nothing to do with Monty Python, which is another title. This is the longest snake in the world, and it can reach a length of up to 33 feet. It's called reticulated because reticulated refers to the net-like structure of veins that run through the body that look like the threads of a net.
This net helps the python to process its large meals. The python feeds on small animals, which it kills by wrapping itself around the animal and squeezing it to death.
Boy, nice image. So remember, never hug a python goodnight, no matter how much it begs you.
Professor, I've always found it interesting that the python can swallow an animal that seems to be wider than its own mouth. Their jaws can be disjointed, allowing them to stretch their mouths to accommodate the creature they're eating. And they have 6 rows of teeth, 2 on each side of the upper jaw and 1 on each side of the lower jaw.
That's right, Cube. And those teeth help them to swallow. The rows of teeth move back and forth and help to work the food into the mouth. Most food is swallowed quickly, but a really large meal can take several hours. And the big pythons can swallow an animal that weighs up to 150 pounds.
Human skeleton.
The human skeleton does many things for us. It helps to protect us, to support us, and it allows bone doctors to make a living. Inside our bones is a very valuable substance called marrow. It produces red and white blood cells and helps to build our immune system. It also provides the body with calcium and phosphorus, which are essential to health. A skeleton is a healthy thing, but if it's in the closet, it can be pretty scary.
There are 206 bones in the adult human body and 29 bones in the skull alone. The vertebral collar is made up of 26 bones, and the thorax is made up of 25. The upper extremities have 64 bones total, and the lower extremities have 62.
The areas where the bones meet, where they are connected, they are called joints. But there's not just one kind of joint. There's lots of crazy joints in the body.
In stationary joints, the bones and tissue are fused together.
Other joints, like in the vertebral column here on the back of my neck, they have fibrous attachments which allow them only a little bit of movement. And then, of course, we have the freely moving joints like this. Look, boy, I'm moving all my joints. This is one swinging joint, ain't it, Cube?
Yes, it is, Professor. And the hand is made of 27 bones linked together by cartilage and ligaments.
That's right. So the next time somebody says, give me 5, it's really 27. Give me 27.
Cell theory.
All living creatures are composed of cells. So you can say that cells represent a common link between the diverse forms of life on our planet.
Cells grow, develop, and give rise to new cells. A plant cell contains the same cell organs, which are called organelles, as an animal cell. However, plant cells contain the organelle known as chloroplasts. Chloroplasts help the cell gain energy from sunlight in a process known as photosynthesis.
Plants lack a bone structure, so their cell walls are very rigid in order to support the plant. It is very easy to identify a plant cell by noting the symmetry in its cell wall structure. Animal cells are very wavy or amorphous, like jelly.
Animal and plant cells consist of a nucleus, which contains the cell's instructions called DNA. Animal cells also have mitochondria, which give energy to the cell as well as allow it to communicate with the surrounding cells.
DNA and RNA. DNA and RNA.
The permanent instructions for making all the parts of your body comes from a chemical called DNA, or deoxyribonucleic acid. It is in every nucleus of almost every cell in your body.
RNA, specifically messenger RNA, is used to regulate which portion of the entire DNA gets expressed from each cell. Messenger RNA is a temporary copy of only a portion of your total DNA.
DNA can be thought of as a complete detailed blueprint of the entire building, while messenger RNA is a floor plan of a single room in that building.
Fungi.
Fungi is the plural of fungus, and they are parasites like mold or mildew or mushrooms. Now, what they do is they survive by living on dead organisms. Ugh, disgusting. They reproduce themselves by forming tiny spores which can be carried by the wind to another host site. Fungi have no chlorophyll and therefore do not photosynthesize.
Fungi can also be cultivated to create bacteria-fighting antibiotics. For example, penicillin is derived from fungi.
Virus.
Viruses are tiny agents which can be seen only through an electron microscope. These infected agents can cause diseases in animals or plants. Viruses invade an organism and then use their cells as a factory to produce more viruses.
Most diseases caused by viruses have no known cure. The organism will either successfully defend itself or be crippled or die as a result of the infection.
Prevention of the infection using a vaccine is the only known method of stopping a virus from infecting an organism. Diseases that are caused by viruses include polio, the flu, measles, chickenpox, AIDS, and the common cold.
Bacteria.
Most bacteria are one-celled microorganisms which multiply by simple cell division. Bacteria are useful in human digestion, decomposing sewage, and fermentation. But bacteria can also cause diseases like anthrax, pneumonia, and tuberculosis.
Bacteria can be fought with antibiotics, and often these antibiotics are made from fungi.
Some bacteria are actually part of the kingdom of the monorans. Monorans lack a true nucleus, and many of the organelles which are the cell organs can be found in more sophisticated forms of life, like people who wear tuxedos.
Human skeleton. Sundial.
Sundials go back to 1500 BC. That's 3,500 years ago. Before that, there were only two times, nighttime and daytime. Then, about 2,600 years ago, Anaximander introduced the sundial to Greece. "Hello, Greece, here's the sundial," he said. 10 people started using it, and they realized that they had been late for years. They just didn't know it.
Anaximander was a philosopher, astronomer, and mathematician born in Miletus, which is now part of Turkey. Why don't you explain how the sundial measures time, Professor?
I thought you'd never ask. When the sun shines on a sundial, it casts a shadow. Now, the sundial has two parts, the gnomon and the dial plane. The gnomon makes the shadow on the dial plane, which is marked with the times of the day. If you explore the junk drawer, you'll find things to make a simple sundial. Some sundials, however, you'd never find in my junk drawer because they would be too big to fit. Right, Q?
That's right, like the sundial at the Walt Disney World headquarters in Florida. It is the largest sundial in the world, and it stands 120 feet tall with a base that measures 122 feet across.
That's some big sundial, I bet.
Stonehenge.
Stonehenge is a very perplexing and fascinating monument because we really don't understand what it represents. It is located in England and was built about 5,000 years ago. But, like I said, we don't really understand what it means.
Scientists have a few different ideas. It might have been a place of worship, it might have been a lunar calendar, or it might have been built to predict eclipses.
Sure, and it might have been an amusement park. 6 Flags Over England.
Stonehenge is surrounded by a circular ditch 304 feet in diameter and 5 feet deep. If you walked around it, you'd have to walk 954 feet.
954 feet, that's the length of 3 football fields.
That's right, Professor. The monument itself has an outer circle of stones, 100 feet in diameter. These are large sandstone blocks called sarsen stones. They weigh over 50 tons, and it's estimated that about 550 men were needed to drag them into place.
Now, inside the outer circle of stones are groupings of smaller stones, at the very center of which lies another big slab of sandstone that is known as the altar stone. I haven't seen this many stones since Bill Wyman came over. There isn't anything else like this in the world. Here's a question. It's always been important to have calendars so we know when the seasons are. Why is it important? A, so you know when to shop for holiday presents? B, so you know when to get sunscreen and your bathing suit together? Or C, so you know when to plant and harvest the crops?
Library. Sundial. Hourglass.
We use the clock to measure time, like your watch. But over the ages, there have been many ways that man has used to mark the passage of time. One of the earliest was the hourglass. It used flowing sand moving from one glass chamber to another to measure how much time had gone by.
And the ancient Chinese measured time by burning a rope with knots in it. They kept track of time according to how long it took for the fire to burn from one knot to the next.
But it would be pretty tough to be on time if you had to have a burning rope hanging from your wrist. What time is it? Ah! Thank you, Bits. Another ancient device was the clepsydra, or water clock. It measured water flowing into a bowl with marks on the side. Some used an object floating on top of the water. The Greeks and Romans used this device to measure the length of speeches made in court.
And it was actually a version of the water clock that led to the mechanical clock.
When you say mechanical clock, you mean the wind-up kind, with a little springs, right, Cube?
That's true, Professor.
Mechanical clock.
The earliest clocks invented had only one hand, and they could only tell time by the quarter hour, so it was very difficult to know exactly what time it was.
So people had to tell time in very broad terms, as you can see in their name for clocks back then.
So don't tease me, Cube. Tell me already, what was the name for clock back then?
It was horologium, which means hour teller. Today we need a clock to tell us a lot more than just what hour it is. And so in the 1500s, we added the minute hand.
Horologium. Cube, do you know what the origin of the word clock is?
Well, Professor, I think it comes from the word bell.
That's right! It means bell, and it came from the bell towers that were used for telling time in the Middle Ages.
Now that we've developed clocks that can tell time reliably and precisely, people have started to make clocks with some personality.
That's right! Clocks talk and glow in the dark. As a matter of fact, there was a strange man named O.W., I think. Cube, let's show the video clip of that strange fellow who collected clocks as a hobby.
Okay, Professor.
Mr. O.W. Dreyer has spent years building unusual clocks and seems to like having time on his hands and hands on his clock. This train clock is running a little late, and although O.W. doesn't look it, he's really ticked off.
Boy, he must have had the time of his life collecting all those crazy clocks. What a cuckoo he was. Whew, I'm hungry. How about the ding-dong? Okay, let's have a multiple choice question. Clocks keep time in different ways. What are some of the different things they use to tell the time? Is it A, peanut butter and marshmallows, B, Rice Krispies and motor oil, or C, atoms, pendulums, and electric current?
Pendulum.
Let's talk about the pendulum. Galileo was the first to suggest that the clock could be regulated by a pendulum, but he was not the first to build one of these clocks. Tell them, Cube.
That honor goes to a Dutch astronomer who built the first pendulum clock in 1657. He used Galileo's ideas to show that the regular swing of a pendulum could be used to turn a wheel at a constant rate, and then the turning wheel could be used to move the hands of a clock.
That's correct. It was Galileo who discovered the property of the pendulum, and he did it in the late 1500s. He called it isochromism. I love to say that word. Tell them what isochromism really means.
Isochromism means that the pendulum swings very regularly.
That is exactly right. And it is the regularity of the pendulum's swing that enables us to measure time with it.
Exactly. And the time it takes a pendulum to complete one swing depends on the length of the pendulum, not the weight on the lower end.
Atomic clock.
the atomic clock. To reach this point, you've had to learn lots of things about clocks. You know that time is kept by utilizing a rhythmic pattern, like the swing of a pendulum or the flow of water. Well, an atomic clock counts the natural vibrations of a certain atom, the cesium atom.
The cesium atom vibrates 9,192,631,770 times every second. This makes the atomic clock the most precise timekeeping piece ever made.
9,192,631,770 times every second. That's incredible. It makes it such a precise instrument. It would be useful to take to the track.
Well, Professor, the smaller the measurement is, the more accurate the clock will be. So a clock that vibrates that many times is very, very accurate.
That's why it'd be perfect for the track. I could tell if my pony was coming in a little late. Okay, it's time for a multiple choice question. If a clock is run by a battery, what kind of clock would it be? Would it be an electric clock? Would it be a mechanical clock? Or would it be a cuckoo clock?